The shadow of Magnetize looms over Mag's kit, but there are a few things you can add to it to make it a bit better. I'm going to recommend Stealth, as random as that might sound. There's nothing quite like the devastating power of Magnetize, wielded from the comfort and safety of a cloak arrow field. I'm going to show you these builds and then move on to some gameplay and discussion before finishing up by talking about the fashion. Yes, I will address the ugly helmet before then. Behold, Assassin Mag. Building for the enormous range that benefits Magnetize, and applying it to Ivara's Quiver, which gives you Cloak Arrow, also gives Mag more options when using Magnetize doesn't fit the bill. So throughout this video, I want you to keep something in mind. Basically anything can kill level 100 whatever enemies in Magnetize. There is no need to specifically build a weapon that does even more absurd overkill damage in Magnetize. Like, do that if you want, that's fine. There are already tons of videos about that. But okay, let me show you something. I'm bringing this mustachioed Lloyd Sentinel skin Jin for this loadout. Jin has a much higher attack range than most Sentinels. Not as high as Dorigo, 70 meters, but I think Jin does a better job of protecting you on occasion with its Fatal Attraction precept. If you're not familiar with this, basically you want enemies to be within 20 meters, but not within 6 meters or the effect will end. Yes, also reawaken. Jin is good. Anyway, the point is that giving your Sentinel a Volk Lock and then casting Magnetize and then just standing there will kill the enemies in the Magnetize. You could just cast Magnetize and let the Volk Lock fire away and the enemies inside the Magnetize will die. Like, not immediately, you could kill them faster, but it doesn't really matter. If you cast Magnetize on a group of enemies, those enemies are dead. So yeah, obviously bringing some weapons that work well with Magnetize is a thing that you should do, but it doesn't really matter that much how strong they are. Having said that, the Volklock is a projectile weapon with punch through. It's basically the Lanka for your Sentinel, so those shots are spinning around inside Magnetize and hitting over and over again. Any weapon with those qualities will do that, but you don't even have to shoot this one. Your Sentinel can just do it for you. The Volklock is also a rare Sentinel weapon that actually has crit and status, so you can make a proper build for it with some decent multipliers. There's nothing special in here, just slap a normal build on there and you're good to go. Just that a ton of fire rate, this weapon is really beyond slow. You really want a lot of fire rate, like at least 2 fire rate mods. I'll come back to the other weapons though. First I'll do Mag's build because it's going to be pretty simple. Priority number 1 is maximum range. Magnetize is far and away the most valuable thing Mag can accomplish, and the range benefits pull and crush as well. Range is also a great stat to build a lot of on radial abilities because circles. The more range, the larger the radius you have, the more overall area, even more range gets you. Maxing range is, however, a bit different on Mag. You may have noticed, yes, this hideous helmet. Arcane helmets are a very old variant of alternate helmets from like 6 years ago that give small stat boosts, and they technically give a positive boost and then a negative boost. Mag has one of the only ones that actually has any meaningful impact. Look, it gives 25% range, okay? I bought it for hundreds of platinum, so you don't have to. Arcane helmets are indeed tradable. Yes, lots of range is great, but no, it's not really meaningful to get even more range when you have this much. Alright, so here's max range Magnetize with the helmet, and then here it is without the helmet. Can you tell much of a difference? No, didn't think so. Yes, it's good. No, don't buy one. You're welcome. Using an arcane helmet does take up an arcane slot, but that's fine. There aren't a lot of useful arcanes for this playstyle anyway. Oh, Magnetize's Augment Magnetize Discharge does give Magnetize a lot more range though. That's fantastic, of course. Manually detonating Magnetize is also fine for offensive purposes. At very high levels, you could get the job done a little faster by doing that at the right time. That's not usually the most relevant. The nice thing about this is that if you're in close quarters, which you are in Warframe, sometimes a Magnetize will be in the way. Enemies will be basically dead or literally dead, and you want to shoot enemies that are beyond your Magnetize, but oh no, you cannot get it out of the way. Now the duration isn't going to be very high on this build, but this does allow you to clear it out of the way if you so choose. That's fine. Again, this is just a range mod for Magnetize, but it does have that bonus. So okay, yeah, max range, cool. Negative strength does cause Magnetize to display this nasty negative damage multiplier. It says 0.8x damage multiplier, but that only applies to the single targeted enemy that you cast Magnetize on, so that doesn't matter. Corrosive projection will often meaningfully increase Magnetize's damage against armored enemies though. And next I want some efficiency and still moderate duration. Obviously efficiency is nice for Magnetize, and this spread of stats is also excellent for cloak arrows. I'll get back to what those do for you later, but with these stats you can fire a cloak arrow arrow for just 10 energy, remain stealth for 15 seconds, and you have a nice area to wiggle around in. You don't have to worry too much about needing to be exactly inside this tiny area. The radius is fairly large. Another nice thing about having a fairly large cloak arrow is the ceiling is kind of high. Like, you can jump up fairly high. You can bullet jump straight up, and if you stop before you hit the top, you won't go out of the cloak arrow, so that's nice. But finally, it makes sense to add some sort of defensive failsafe. I chose rolling guard in this case. You can be stealthed or have everything magnetized most of the time, so I don't think more than this is really necessary. The other major defense for this build is simply casting Crush to bank some overshields. It won't give much for every individual target hit because the strength is low, but the range is so high as to somewhat make up for that. If you have extra energy, you can just fill up your overshields with Crush, which is largely a better polarize in this case, which is why I removed that for Quiver. Another approach you could take is to drop, say, Constitution for just health and adaptation, and then you could run an Armor Arcane here. As it stands, I actually don't know what Arcane I'm going to use here, so I'll just leave it blank for now. Yeah, obviously the focus is Zenric, because I plan to stay alive with an ability. For that, I need energy. Okay, so weapons. Again, basically anything that interacts favorably with Magnetize will do, anything with projectile flight time and punch through, or anything that benefits more from headshots. I have one of each of those. The Miter does pretty unexciting damage, but this augment deletes nullifier bubbles, which are a huge problem for Mag. Even faster than just shooting a rapid fire weapon at them, this will make sure nobody pops your bubble. Adding fire rate will supplement that strength. I chose both Vile Acceleration and Shred here because, you know, I mean, this is a thing you can do. How many nullifier bubbles was that? Looking at the Miter's stats, if you want it to do damage, you should add some status elemental mods and skip the crit mods. They don't quite do enough with this low crit chance. Slash mod might not be the worst idea. I think it's fine with or without it. Spray uncharged shots to take out nullifiers, and I kind of recommend charged shots on bubbles. It sort of seems like maybe that punch through works better with them somehow. But anyway, I'll show you what that looks like. They serve their purpose fairly well. If you group enemies together and fire, you know, one or two, that takes care of the enemies in very short order. Since we're in the simulacrum anyway, I thought I'd just sneak in this quick example that it doesn't really matter how high level these enemies are. I turned it up to 150, and you almost can't even tell the difference. That was a punch-through projectile weapon, kind of like the Sentinel's Volklock. So then I have the Zymos. This weapon is inaccurate and slow, but if it somehow lands a headshot, this happens. Magnetize redirects bullet fired at it into its center, so if you shoot the Zymos, it will redirect the bullets from the top down and fairly reliably get headshots. This splatters enemies all over the place in a glorious spray of blood. That lets you get around the Zymos' janky accuracy, but one thing you can't really get around is the low critical chance. But you can build a bit more status than is usually sensible here, and consider elements that are good when hitting multiple targets together. Fulmination also isn't the worst idea simply because you have room for it, but in Magnetize it won't matter very much since enemies will be grouped together already. Heavy weapon is Dual Decurion. The main benefit of this weapon is its enormous ammo pool relative to how much it uses, which means you can put it away and take it back out quite frequently. Heavy weapon cooldowns are proportional to the amount of ammo you use, so you can use a significant amount of ammo and then put it away, and it will still have a reasonable cooldown. So that was a couple of magazines, and now we'll just swap off it. And the cooldown is only a mere 15 seconds. So basically, as often as you're going to want to use it, you can take it out. And you can use a cloak arrow to take it out in safety and luxury. Simply waiting for the cooldown for a moment and then deploying the weapon will give you a nice, safe environment to deploy your dual doughboys. Ammo chain makes this work even better. It's kind of funny to me that heavy weapons have the only respectably large ammo maximum mod, and they're already the category of weapon where ammo maximum actually does something. I don't know. I also chose this weapon because I wanted a long-range, accurate automatic weapon, just in case I needed it for something. This loadout doesn't have something like that, and Dual Decurion is that. It's not very exciting to build, though. Just consider critical focus once you have your basic multipliers in order. And to save the best for last, it's the Quasis. I've been holding out on you. This may be the most fun part. So this heavy attack fires these blades, and they're not very accurate. As you can see, they go kind of everywhere. But you know, they all force slash procs. That's awesome. Wow, that's really good. A weapon that does preposterously high damage if it somehow lands a hit, but is heinously inaccurate. What does that remind me of? Oh, it's Magnetize. You use Magnetize, and then you can hit the enemies with the thing, and then you have stealth multipliers, and you can glorious. Besides including Fury for a bit more attack speed so that you can do those follow-up hits very frequently, this weapon doesn't have any special interaction with Magnetize besides, becoming accurate at long range. It essentially just lines enemies up so you can knock them down with heavy attacks from stealth, from range, and that's still very good. I also think it's very satisfying. As for practical use, I demonstrated a lot more things than usual in the simulacrum this time. This loadout gets better the more enemies there are, and it's also best if you don't have to move around too much. You can pull out the dual double-doos and bank some overshields and do an exterminate, like that's going to be fine, but it doesn't make much sense to use this stuff for a capture mission, for example. I particularly like survival and interception. In those mission types, you get a lot out of controlling space and grouping enemies up, and you can still avoid things like energy leeches that pose problems for these kinds of loadouts that rely on abilities to stay alive. One really nice thing about killing enemies in Magnetize with all this range is you can do it from really far away if you have line of sight. So if you're doing an interception and you can find a way to see a faraway point, you can do the Zymos or the Miter thing. You can almost do the Quastus thing from very far away, and so you should be able to kill large numbers of enemies and do that crazy amount of damage at essentially any range while remaining completely invisible wherever you are. I included a variety of weapons that happen to be good with Magnetize to give you examples, but also for different situations. Projectiles spinning around in there doesn't work as well if Magnetize is in an area that's very narrow. Getting headshots by shooting things in from the top doesn't work as well if the ceiling is too low. The Quastus is a suitable backup in those situations. The Quastus also doesn't have ammo, of course, so between that and your Sentinel automatically killing enemies in Magnetize with his Volklock, you could get a lot of convenience out of this loadout in open worlds. Speaking of which, I suppose you have noise arrows, don't you? I didn't say anything about those. Is that somewhat okay for conservation? Maybe this is a decent conservation loadout. I guess not for any particular reason. I'm sure people in the comments will tell me about the noise arrow tech that I built into this loadout but don't yet know about. So we'll look forward to that together. But you want to know what else we're hopefully both looking forward to? This fashion frame. So I already explained that the coil helmet is a necessary evil for science. I'm allowed to have this ugly helmet. This appearance is essentially built around the fact that I needed, quote-unquote, to use this ugly, chonky helmet. Why is this helmet ugly? I mean, you might not think it's ugly. I think it's very ugly. It's ugly because it's too chonky. Like, it's big. Like, look at some other mag helmets. So if I were to put this on, like, look how much smaller that is. This is just such a chonkster. Like, look at this helmet. It's huge. People who have big heads, like, I could not possibly mean less offense. Like, that's fine. But on Warframes, for some reason, because they're, like, sort of not people, they're sort of armored things, it just looks silly. So anyway, I decided to counter that by using these huge, chonky boy shoulder knee pads, but also the shoulder pads are chonky. And then the Kuvazavok chest plate. There are a few of these. There's a whole bunch of these harnessy boys, and they all do a decent job of making a frame look chonkier. Which is good when you have some part of their body that is just too large. Mag is also one of those frames where a lot of her skins, I feel like the color blotches, like there's too much of each color everywhere. There are a lot of Mag skins, and they all have this problem. They're not a one of them. Oh, that's a lot better, actually. Okay, yeah, like you could sell me on, that actually looks pretty sick. But anyway, my wallet doesn't think so, so there you go. I want to talk about the Trio Orbit ephemera. This is a weird one. Something that I'd like to do in this series overall is try to find homes for things that I think are just weird, and like I think it could serve a purpose here. So if you like this thing or this thing perplexes you the way it does me, maybe you could enjoy it in this particular place. Trio Orbit ephemera is that here. For some reason, I just like the idea of, you've noticed throughout this video, you can see the little orbit things when you're invisible, so you like know where you are. Like, you do know where you are, but for some reason I really wanted that. I can't explain it any better than that. This Sayandana, for some reason it just looks evil to me. It looks like a evil, edgy cape that fuels the edgy energy of this fashion that I tricked you all into thinking was the meme fashion. Haha. And I mean, what else can we even say about the mustachioed Lloyd Sentinel skin? I wanted to do, this looks like a supervillain mustache to me, and I wanted to put that on the Lloyd Sentinel skin. Now, at last, we have reached the glorious Elysium where that is possible. So, you're welcome. Please follow in my footsteps and make evil genius mustachio twirling Lloyd. I guess the ephemera I put on here because for some reason I just like to have a lot going on visually if the loadout is going to stand still a lot, which this one is. So Lloyd is a bit of a fireworks show for us while we're twirling our own mustaches and casting Magnetize in stealth. That was Assassin Mag. I hope some part of it entertained or inspired you. I'll catch you on the other side.